In this video, we're going to go ahead and go over a little method you can use to get a little bit more independence, to get out of the vertical plane and create lines more in the horizontal plane using simple chords. I found with my years of teaching that using some kind of a limitation exercise can actually force this. We're in an age that's really more interested in vertical stacks, whereas if you look at masterworks, they can get the most out of like 2 chords in a very horizontal fashion. So we'll use Mixolydian for this example, and we'll use Mixolydian 1 and Mixolydian 5. Now here's the typical way to do it, just in a typical vertical stack. Well, we need to learn how to break away from that. If you really want to break away from this verticalness, first let's input the 2 chords we'll deal with. Because I want this to be a notational thing too. Everybody's so focused on keyboards, I want to concentrate on notation as well, because it gives a very good representation of the horizontal plane. So let's come up with a plan. Maybe I'll start with this stack and go to this stack. Still vertical. However, with just these 2 chords, if you think in this horizontal plane instead of this vertical, you can create all kinds of variations and whatnot. So maybe this is our starting point, an answer, something like that. We'll do just something like that. Maybe it's an opening statement, so let me put that in there, that little chord structure. And we'll do it like this. First statement, let me put in the second statement, and then we're going to put in a rest bar in between. Bear with me for a second, we're just creating some kind of structure that we can use. So, statement, rest, statement, or answering statement, as if you're starting a piece. Now here's the catch. If you use a 3-note limitation and always have a root third and a fifth, you can try stuff like this to gain a little bit more independence. This is where inversion knowledge really becomes helpful. So if I do this, first inversion, D, second inversion, but the upper voice went downward instead of just constantly up. So we can make our opening statement like this. Sounds a little different than just jumping chords, so let's make the second statement. Starting with the first statement, piano is not a very good sustained instrument. That middle voice can be sustained, and I'll show you in a second. Here's the second statement, using opposite motion on the outside voices many times, while retaining a root third and a fifth. Maybe you could start it out low, and then the second statement up high. Much different effect than just alternating the 2 chords in a vertical fashion. Now the second time we could even do something like this, or passing tones in the lower end, giving even more independence. Let's play the outside lines with the bottom line first, and then with the middle line. Especially if you hold the D, that gives even more independence. I'll show you a practical use in a second, because piano is not a very good sustaining instrument. And then the second go around again, we have the option to walk. Still the same 2 chords. Now I'll go right out this scheme for you. One reason notation is great is because you can see the independence of lines when you're visually looking at it. You see 3 separate lines here from what we just did, instead of these parallel chords. In a vertical stack, now we have a horizontal situation in each voice. They're each doing something slightly different from each other. Like playing just the outside lines. Sometimes one's going up, sometimes one's going down, sometimes one's doing walking, etc., etc. The middle voices and the top voice. All this from choosing 3 voice limitation and always having a root third and a fifth, middle voice and low voice, etc., etc. To get this, 2 chords. The answer, as if it's a second statement. I'll just hit play on the notation playback here. little rest area as if we're doing an opening statement. Silence is important. I'm not a real big fan of full string patches, but here's a practical use. Let's say you want string parts to sound independent, playing these two chords, as if they're all doing something a little different. When you split it out to groups, that's a practical use. Let's change this up. Let's go to Phrygian dominant and do the same exact procedure. Let's go Phrygian dominant 1, G minor 4, back to the 1 chord, now the 7 chord, which is C minor, and I'll write it out for you. We'll even use the similar scheme as above here. The same statement scheme. So D root position, first inversion, we always need the root in third and fifth, second inversion, just like above. Now, the G minor first inversion, D second inversion, first inversion, second inversion, C minor root position, second inversion. This forces you to change notes to fit if you always have a root third and fifth, giving us a sense of motion in the horizontal plane just using chords. We could do something similar to the last one. Start out with just a statement, just chords, and now use some walking on the low end. And if you study classical masters all the way through like the Romantic era and forward even, this is a lot of the tricks they use to get that independent sound, even just using chords. And I'm putting motion on the bottom because most people associate motion with the top voice. Hitting playback, you could hold that D there in the middle voice, a little rest area with the answer statement. Again, I don't like full string patches because I'm not even going to get into that. Here's what a practical use would be to start something like that. It's just to get a general idea of a practical use. I'm not even using the walking either. We can use the walking, which would actually greatly improve the independence. But instead of doing this parallel motion, instead of the vertical thinking, we have horizontal thinking. Let's use the walking motion now. Doing that with a low-end voice really gives it independence. But you don't even need it for independence. You could start out low like this, and then maybe the second statement be up high without walking. Repeat the first statement, then do the second statement with walking. That would be a way to start a piece. Maybe all over a low-end pedal point. Something like that. I can't play the parts at the same time. They're too spread apart. That would be a practical use, but the point is to get yourself out of that vertical stack thinking and more into that horizontal realm thinking for practical reasons. You may want groups to sound like they're doing separate things, even when they're just playing chordal stuff. And one way to do that is to have a 3-note limitation and force yourself to always have a root third and a fifth and try to switch inversions and try to change directions and opposite motion and whatnot when you do so. And also try things like holding the tone that doesn't need to change. Just hold it. Have it be statically held. That creates independence while the others are doing motion, giving off the illusion that they're separate parts. Yet they're still just playing chords. Now you could add on top of that passing tones and whatnot, and that greatly enhances the independence.